But you could give them a print card, like a physical interaction, but the best information, the most accurate, the primary way that they're going to ask a question, sign up, etc., is going to be online. That is the expectation of people. Even if they're coming to a physical in-person event, most people don't want to go and write their name with a pen on a paper in the lobby. They want a digital experience of that. And of course, we need to accommodate for seniors and other people who, we can have an alternative way for them to do some things by calling the church office or whatever that is, and they can be walked. Someone, the person at the front desk of the church can on the phone walk that senior through signing up on the online registry. Like they can do it for the person over the phone or whatever. There's ways we can accommodate for people, but overall, digital first.
Welcome to another episode of the Missional Marketing Podcast. Jason Hamrock and Bart Blair here. We are your hosts and want to thank you for tuning into the show today. Jason and I have got a great interview queued up for you here. We've had this string of Canadians that we have been interviewing lately. Rich Birch was on the show recently. Another Canadian that Jason is going to introduce you today. And coming up in another couple of weeks, we've got Mark McDonald, who is also Canadian. He's lived in Florida long enough. I think the Canadian is out of him. But hey, all these Canadians, my heart's in Canada. I did ministry in Canada for 20 years. So it's always kind of like a little bit of a homecoming for me to connect to the Canadians. Even the guy who edits this podcast, his name is Randall. He lives in Canada.
Randall's
he's Canadian
in Canada.
too. He's a Canadian as well. So lots of Canadian connections. Jason, why don't you introduce today's guest?
Love to, Bart. So today we're talking with Joanna La Fleur, and she is... she's a consultant and when it comes to communications and working with churches, very, very sharp. And so today we talk a little bit about, why is it, and we kind of understand this, but she goes deeper into this. Why is it important to have digital as a strategy in your communications department at your church? And so it's a very intriguing conversation. I'm excited for you to hear from her. She has her own ministry, her own business called Word Made Digital. And so they'll be in the show notes on how to connect with Joanna, but it's a great conversation. Can't wait for you to listen in.
Absolutely. Joanna's a lot of fun. She's a person that I would choose to hang out with. Not everybody that we interview on this podcast, no offense, but not everyone would I choose to hang out with, but she seems like a lot of fun and super, super sharp, super bright, serving from the T-Dot, from the 6, way up there in Toronto, Raptor, and Blue Jay land. Okay, that's where she is. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. We really appreciate it. We have been getting more and more feedback from those of you who are listening to the show or watching on our YouTube channel and getting phone calls from time to time with people saying, hey, I listened to this podcast and I'm calling you because I need help. That's why we do this podcast. We want you to learn and benefit from the content that we're creating here, but we also want you to know that we're here to help you and to serve you. If you're a church communications director or a pastor, executive pastor, or a volunteer in your church, and you're looking for just new and different ways to reach more people in your community online, we'd love to talk to you. So make sure that you reach out. If you haven't left us a rating or a review wherever you consume this podcast, we'd appreciate you doing that. And make sure that you subscribe so that you don't miss any further episodes. All the business stuff, that's what I had to say. This podcast is sponsored by Missional Marketing. That wasn't in my script, but I said it's sponsored by Missional Marketing in case you missed that. Here's our interview with Joanna La Fleur from Word Made Digital. Joanna, thanks so much for joining us all the way from the 6, the T-Dot, the GTA, the tip of the golden horseshoe. I'm saying all these things that you have maybe, I hope I said all those things right. I lived there for a while, but you are joining us from Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
There it is. Thanks so much. Toronto.
Thanks so much for being on the show today. All my young hip friends will be proud that I referred to it as the 6. It used to be the T-Dot, right?
Well, and as I say, if this is a video podcast, I live in high up in the sky and out the window there. If people see, there's some of Toronto. It's the biggest city in Canada. It's bigger than Chicago. So it's like, I think it's something like New York, LA, then Toronto, then Chicago in terms of size. Wow. Just to give my American friends some context. It's a huge city and I live right in the middle of it.
Right in the dead center. And I'm going to go on a limb and say probably the most multicultural city in North America. Probably.
So they say, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Language, culture, religion, and I think the best part, the food. We get to eat our way around the world here in Toronto, which is fun.
Oh, that's cool.
That is true. But if you're in Toronto, you got to have poutine. I mean, it's just kind of a given. If you haven't been to Toronto, find some poutine. I guess
it's just as a random side note of that. If people don't know what it is, people were when the Ukraine-Russia war, and they're hearing about Putin, the leader, President Putin, they were thinking Putin and poutine were the same. So people were boycotting poutine because they thought it was named after Putin. Oh. It's not. It's a French thing. Fries, cheese, gravy. It's good.
Not good for you, but very, very good.
No,
that sounds good. Fries, cheese, and gravy. I'm in. Let's do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is a point to this podcast today, and we're going to get to it. Joanna, for our audience, for our listeners, for our viewers, why don't you take a few minutes to just share your story. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you ended up in ministry, and how it led to you doing what you're doing today.
Yeah, there's always a long and short version, but so feel free to, if you want more, I can say more, but come from a ministry-minded, missions-minded family, have lived abroad as a kid growing up, ministry and missions. My parents weren't, my dad was a nuclear engineer, which led to being able to travel and work all over the world, but the heart was always ministry in the family I grew up in. So wherever we went, ministry and discipleship was in the home I grew up in. So faith was a part of my life. Then of course, everybody goes to young adulthood and has to wrestle it through for themselves. I went into business and marketing direction because I honestly didn't see, for one of the main things was I didn't really have any models of women doing leadership and ministry in the churches I come from. So I started there. I ended up in the high tech world. I lived in Waterloo, Ontario, which is Silicon Valley North. It's where BlackBerry this is relative. It was BlackBerry's heyday when I was coming up through my university years into graduation. And so everybody's working in tech where I lived. Then I felt like a really strong pull from the Lord, which is a whole story of its own, to use the skills I was using in tech for the church: communications, marketing, PR, digital technology. And so that meandered me part-time and then full-time into church work. I ended up at a church that became a mega church while I was there. So my job changed a few times, but I was on the pastoral, the ministry team there, lots of different job titles over the years, but ultimately I was overseeing creative and communications on the side, started my master's in theology and then hosting the Word Made Digital podcast and co-hosting a women's TV talk show on the Canadian National, the Christian channel, and on. And all this stuff was kind of happening on the side. And I had to choose. So after 9 years working in the megachurch land, just before COVID, really before the pandemic changed a lot of our lives, I jumped out and began doing this stuff on my own, which has now grown into a team. Word Made Digital, on one hand, is this content creation and sort of podcasting, TV, speaking at events, doing tutorial videos. The other half is helping others do that with their content. So churches and charities who need, communication strategy help and are trying to figure out what to do in the digital world, or if they should be on TikTok, or how they need to rebrand and all that kind of stuff. That's the, not the longest version, but a longer version than I thought I'd tell you.
In the middle. Yeah. Hey, let's camp out there. You said something that caught my attention, and it's, part of who's listening to these podcasts are typically church communication directors or executive pastors, lead pastors. We have a little bit of everybody. These days, it seems like we're talking a lot of strategy, because it's like a lot of churches coming out of COVID are having to figure out their new strategy.
Yeah.
In your opinion, because you're in the thick of it, how are you leading churches when it comes to a communication strategy? What does that look like? Give some advice to some people that are listening going, we're starting those conversations and we're not even sure what to even do.
Well, the best way to say it is, if I might be, or my small team, we might be the experts on communications, the church or the Christian organization, they're the expert on their organization. And so it's really more of like a working together idea of, if you're the expert at this and I'm the expert at that, if we come together, we can really make a strategy that makes sense for you. Now, that said, there are probably some handles, some touch points that are true everywhere. A common one that I say that is not unique to me, but we talk about digital first, not digital only. The first way, the best information, the most accurate content, the way we engage with people is online. And we hope that will lead to in-person engagements and connections with people. But even after it has moved to in-person, of course, you're going to have lots of ongoing connections through digital content and just through digital conversations. And so, that would be probably overall a philosophy. We talk about, one of the other things I talk about is we tell the truth, which is, I find a lot of churches want to exaggerate how great everything is. Or they want to make it look like there's, 1,000 people in the room when there's only 100. And it's fine that there's 100 people in the room. But when you make it look like there's 1,000 because of your unique camera angle, then when people show up, they see that it was the 100, not the 1,000. And you've just immediately broken trust with people from the first moment they walk in the door. Because it was fine that it was 100, but if they were expecting something else, they feel kind of like intuitively like they've been a bit deceived or tricked or something. And so you're kind of losing people from the moment they come. So, we want to tell the truth, digital first. And from there, we get into more granular things.
Yeah. Well, you just said a couple of things. I want to recap that. So strategy is important, and understanding that leadership has a strategy. And then as comms people, we have a strategy, but we take our cues from leadership of where are you wanting to go? What's the message? And okay, now we'll package that up and make sure it's delivered and articulated the way you want it done. And I think sometimes we get that disconnect. I think it's an unintentional disconnect. It's that we're not asking the leadership, what's our strategy? Where are we going? What's God communicating to you that we need to now communicate to our people and our community? I think that was the first thing you said. And the second one is, I always camp out in the first one, but the second one is important. Building trust. When people that are in the community looking at you and not I call it bait and switch. Don't be deceiving people. Now, you may think it's not happening, but you got to take a hard look at that, huh? Maybe in your social media posts or things of that nature. Is that what you're kind of?
Even when you say like, it's a certain culture, maybe. I mean, this is just another example where people will say this was the best sermon ever. And if you miss Sunday, it was so awesome. And it's like, every week can't be your best week ever. Like, it's weird that we're saying that. Like, and I think it also sets up the minister, the pastor, the preacher, the whoever, with a lot of unnecessary pressure, as if we expect some home run every week. That's just not life. And so people know that, and just feels disingenuous.
You're reading my mail. It is one of my pet peeves. I've been in the church planting space for most of my 20 years of ministry. And so I spend a lot of time around church planters. I love church planters. Without church planters, we wouldn't have churches being planted. I'm going to say that, but they are often the worst about every Sunday on their own social media feed. You don't want to miss this weekend. Best sermon ever. It's going to be the best. You don't want to miss it. And that hyperbole, I mean, I understand their enthusiasm. I've been there. I've been that pastor who thought, wow, I really do have a great message this week. And then the next week, wow, I have a really good message this week. And you don't ever want people to miss it. You don't ever want people to skip out on what you think God has given you to deliver that could be life-changing for them. But you're right. Not every Sunday can be the best Sunday. Some are going to be better than others, and some are just. And we do a thing in our staff meeting at Missional Marketing every Friday. We do kind of highlights of the week, and I think last week I went. This week was vanilla. There was no chocolate. There were no sprinkles.
That's okay.
It wasn't a bad week. It was just kind of a vanilla week, and it's okay that we do vanilla. I love that. I'm going to double click on that as well. Jason said the building trust. I think authenticity is one of the key ways that we do that. And I'm not saying like, I mean, I had a church recently that kind of pushed back on actually their senior pastor. The communications team had given us some photos to use in an ad campaign we were running, and the senior leadership team pushed back on it because one of the photos showed a bunch of empty seats in the sanctuary in their auditorium. And they're like, no, we don't want pictures shown with empty seats. But okay, I mean, I kind of get that. And we can crop the photo so that it doesn't highlight or accentuate the fact that there are empty seats. But, maybe you can capitalize on the fact that there's an empty seat here for you, the person who's actually seeing this ad, the person that we're trying to communicate to, and just use who you are and what you have to build that authentic trust. In the business world, pros will say, Kenny Zhang would say, people will do business with you when they know you, like you, and trust you. And I think the same is true in the church world. They get to know us, they come to like us, they'll engage with us and stick with our community when they come to trust us. And I think that's a really important thing for us to consider.
Yeah. Well, and the same,
go ahead.
Just the same for churches. That's the whole point, is they will come to your church if they know you, like you, and trust you. They will come to know Christ if they know him, like him, and trust him, yes. So I'm not saying we have to I'm not saying we should self-depreciate, our service, nobody's here, don't take up, you don't have to post a terrible photo. But I think it's just, we're not often honest, and people are smart, savvy consumers, and they know. And if they don't know from looking, as soon as they show up, they're going to know.
Have you taken a lot of those tactics that you learned in the corporate world when it comes to marketing and communications, which is typically around selling, something, the buyer's journey? Have you taken a lot of those same principles and applied them to the church world?
I suppose I have, but I don't know if I've done it very intentionally. I think some of the stuff that seems to be in the waters these days that church people are talking about is how, for the last 40, 50 years, business approaches, entrepreneur approaches to church have been like a major emphasis in a lot of churches. And even then, some of the leaders and advocates of that we've admired have had, significant moral failures in the last number of years. And so, not that it's all on their shoulders, but we can be honest to say the church is shrinking, not growing. So there's something to learn from business. And of course, as a communications professional, a marketing professional, there are skills and techniques that we can use to serve the church. But we have to be honest about how they only go so far. That is, we need to an honest look in the mirror and just say, have we left the Holy Spirit at the door? And I don't mean that in a hyper charismatic kind of sense. I mean, literally. Are we relying on our own strength instead of the work of God in our churches to do what he can only do?
Yeah.
Hi, Bart Blair here. I'm the producer of Missional Marketing's Church Growth Interviews podcast. On behalf of our entire team, we really appreciate you tuning in. Let me ask you a question. If you're a church leader or a church communications professional, do you know how Google sees your church website? In other words, if people in your community were to Google churches near me, or best church in my city, or good church nearby, do you know where your church website would show up in those search results? At the top maybe, or somewhere in the middle, or somewhere on page 4? There's a common misunderstanding that if we simply build a great website and we launch it, that Google will somehow work its magic and people will find us online. But there's a bit more art and science to making sure that your church website shows up in the top of those search results. And that science is called local SEO, or local search engine optimization. And at Missional Marketing, local SEO is one of the core services that we provide for churches all across the United States and Canada. And we'd love to help you. If you'd like to learn more, click to our website at missionalmarketing.com and follow the link at the top of the page that says Church SEO. You can request a free local SEO report to see how your church is showing up in Google these days, and you can schedule an appointment to talk with Jason or with me or with one of our other digital strategists to help you decide whether or not a local SEO boost is right for your church. Hey, again, we appreciate you tuning into our podcast, and we look forward to the opportunity to serving you in your church and reaching more people for Jesus. Now, back to the show.
That's that secret ingredient that we have that the corporate doesn't have, is the Holy Spirit. And I think it's interesting where I try and, when I talk to churches, I try and communicate that people are on, if you're looking for a church, these days, you literally can shop around online and you can look at photos and read reviews and watch a sermon and do that. And you need to make sure you have your, not like we were saying before, not misinformation or leading people down the wrong path, but you really want to have a positive positive experience with that. And I think it's important sometimes if we, you think about the corporate world where they do a lot of, they're trying to sell you something with a credit card transfer of information or an email, or you downloaded something. There's a gift for you. I think in the church where we can learn from that, where you can have gated content. Bart says this all the time, have gated content for somebody that gives value to their life and to what they're looking for. And that that's branding the church in a local church in a sense. And that really goes a long way. Churches, we never really did that in the past. I see more churches doing that these days.
Yeah, I think, of course, it's always the balance of like, what can we learn from the best? If we go back to the beginning, Jesus, the Apostle Paul, they're quoting and referencing context in philosophy and thinking of the day. So yes, of course, there's lots we can learn, but it's where we rely. Can we do this entire thing and Jesus doesn't need to be involved? That's when I get concerned.
Yeah, for sure.
No.
Joanna, you said something earlier that I want to kind of backtrack to and get you to drill down on a little bit. And that is, you said you focus on digital first, not digital only. Mm-hmm. And I'd like you to kind of expound on that a little bit and maybe explain a little bit why you think churches should care about digital as it is, pre-COVID, pan-COVID, post-COVID, new world that we're in. Why is digital important for churches? And what is the difference between digital first rather than digital only or digital as a primary?
Yeah. The metaphor I love to use is dating apps, which if you rewind 20 years ago, were frankly, creepy, desperate people went to dating apps. And today, that is not the case. It is the primary way people who are looking for a romantic partner are and like a long-term serious relationship. That's where they're going to find someone. It's weird to go up to a stranger, at a public place and talk to them. That's creepy now. The not creepy thing is to meet someone on the internet. And so, in the same way. So on dating app, the point is to meet people you never would have had opportunity to cross paths with before. But once you meet and get to know each other a little bit online, the intention of it, if you're looking for a relationship, is to meet in person. That's the point. You're going to meet in person. And yet then also, if it does continue, you're going to have digital interactions. I'm sure, all of us do with our family and loved ones and friends every single day. We're texting, please grab milk on your way home, or you're away and you're FaceTiming your kids. There's digital interactions throughout the relationship. So you met online, you never would have met any other way. The intention is to come and meet in person, but then even then throughout that, in between those in-person interactions, you're connecting online. So in the same for the church, there are people who would never know about your church, or maybe even say there would be people who would, the only way they could be introduced to Christ and the good news of Jesus would be on the internet. It's the only place they're going to get access. I can think of a guy I know in Ottawa, Canada. I just met him recently at a wedding, and it wasn't a quote unquote Christian wedding. So it surprised me when this groomsman was quoting C.S. Lewis in his speech. So I had to go up to him and find out his story. And he had just become a Christian recently through YouTube. And from there, you don't stay on YouTube. You go and you want to find a local church. He's part of a community. He's brought his family with him and his kids and his wife, and they're all trying to figure it out now. And what's this guy that she married and what has become of him, that he's changed, into being a Christian all of a sudden. And so they're working that all out in the context of a real physical community in a local church. But he's continuing to go to the internet to get more information, to ask his big philosophical questions. He has big questions about life because he was a staunch atheist. And so, of course, these are the analogies from the dating app, right? That you're going to meet Jesus or meet a church that you never would have had exposure to online. That's the introduction. The intention is to get in person. But then even after you come to church in person, or you come to the event or the Bible study or the Alpha group, or I don't know, whatever it is that you do, you're going to keep interacting with them online, just like we all do. And so that's what I mean by digital first, but not digital only. It's the first way. It's a primary way. I mean, we can get into some nitty gritty about, if you have a promo card for an upcoming event, your summer camp for kids or something, like those parents are going to expect that they're going to register their child for the event digitally. They're going to go online. That's the expectations now of any parent of young children. They're going to go online to register their child for the summer camp or the whatever Christmas party or whatever the heck it is. And, but you could give them a print card, like a physical interaction, but the best information, the most accurate, the primary way that they're going to ask a question, sign up, etc., is going to be online. That is the expectation of people. Even if they're coming to a physical in-person event, most people don't want to go and write their name with a pen on a paper in the lobby. They want a digital experience of that. And of course, we need to accommodate for seniors and other people who, we can have an alternative way for them to do some things by calling the church office or whatever that is, and they can be walked. Someone, the person at the front desk of the church can on the phone walk that senior through signing up on the online registry. Like they can do it for the person over the phone or whatever. There's ways we can accommodate for people, but overall, digital first.
Yeah.
And I'll say from the comms perspective, being the local church communicator, nothing was more upsetting than when either there was a print mistake, it was misspelled, or the times, dates, details changed after you already printed and spent all the money. So if you just have on your print card vague information that directs them to the website, it costs $0 to update, edit, change, correct.
Yeah.
Add more details on the website.
Jason, did I ever tell you about the time that when I was serving at the church in Ontario, printed, I think, 15 or 20,000 postcards to go out to our community. And I put my home phone number on the card.
Yes,
I didn't notice it until my wife was looking at it. She's like, why is our home phone number on here? That is a problem. That is a problem.
So don't do that by just
do that.
Just say like, I don't know what did you say the event was? It's Christmas or whatever, Christmas at the church. You could maybe have the days or something, but then all the details of times and how to sign up and what's going on and whatever the details are that they need, put them online so they can change.
Yeah.
Often the things need to go in church world, things need to go to print before the leader knows the answer to that information. Yeah. And so send them to the website. You can print the card before you even know all the details.
Yeah. And that's really convenient. And I think you're absolutely right. I think digital first. I'll give you an example. This weekend, our church, we had a baptism weekend, and they shared a video where I think it was 5 ladies that do not live in the area. They're from out of state. They met at our church online, and they all became friends, and they have a small group that meets regularly. Well, they all wanted to get baptized. They'd never been baptized before. So they all decided to fly to Phoenix, come to church, and get baptized at the same time. And so here's a group of ladies who met digitally, okay, and it was facilitated by our church, developed that relationship, answered a lot of questions, all decided. So then they eventually came together, hug each other, get baptized, and have that special moment together. They are lifelong friends from here on out, right? They can continue to do life together, even though they're in different states. And I just think that's a really cool picture.
And they can be real relationships. There's some of the statistics too. I'm curious about how they've changed. Maybe my data is out of date, but this idea of like something like if you're under this is my dog yelling at us. That's okay. If you're under the age of 40, online relationships you would view as no different than in person. Whether you've met in person or not, they're real relationships. And people over 40 have a harder time reconciling that they're the same or as real. Yeah. But people who've grown up with it, which is now kind of the under 40-year-olds, they view it as the same.
These half are older and half are younger. I think it's the lifestyle where you are in life. I don't know the stories of these gals. All I know is they were online. They came together, celebrated this moment together, and I'm sure in the future they're going to do trips together and whatnot. And that is real community. Yeah. In a digital world. And, I think ideally you want to have more in person, but that doesn't mean it has to be that way. And I think as church communication directors and people that are in church communications, we have to understand and facilitate that we are creating the platform. Let God do what God's going to do best, and the Holy Spirit work through these people. We just have to bring them together and have a platform to do that. You know what I'm saying? It's pretty important. So I think we often overlook that.
Yeah, I like the way our friend Nathan Art puts it. He's like, use digital as a step towards the in-person, right? Using digital as a step towards incarnational. Ultimately, I think we all know, and we, or at least at the very least, we value at a very high level the kind of discipleship that can take place when life is being experienced together, more so than when it's being experienced online. And there, again, not to devalue the impact that an online relationship and online connections can have, but the level of depth of a relationship and the impact that those relationships have in your life are going to be much more accentuated in the context of in-person, authentic in-person incarnational relationships. So thanks for kind of diving into that. I just wanted a little more clarity. We in the roles that we get to play, we have a lot of conversations with a lot of churches about digital and what we're really doing. And we have 350, 400 different churches that we get to work with, and we get to see all kinds of different things that a lot of churches are doing. Everybody's trying to find that silver bullet, the magic thing that's going to make digital church and digital connections work. And some are seeing some fruit from the work and the efforts that they're doing. But I can't help but champion those that are using their online connections as a way of deliberately moving people along a pathway to eventually make an in-person connection. And let's just face it, most pastors, I was a pastor for 17 years, and most pastors, in the end of the day, we're really interested in people coming through the doors that we can get to know, that we can actually invest in and experience life with. Even though online views are great, YouTube analytics, can puff you up and make you feel really good. At the end of the day, we really want to meet people in person. So, but I love the way that you highlighted that, and that was pretty cool. Joanna, who are some of the people that you're looking to as you continue to try to grow in your skills and get better at what you do, you and your team? Who are you looking to, learning from, leaning into, that's anybody we might have heard of, or anybody that we might not be familiar with who you can highlight?
There aren't too many that when I'm thinking about the church space, broadly, there's lots of leaders I listen to, but I think when we're talking about marketing and communications, I'm really looking more to just people on the internet, like Chris Do, who runs The Future, that's Future without an E on the end. His endeavor is to help 1 million creatives do their work. So he has a lot of great thinking on communication and websites and design and branding and all this kind of stuff. I think of a guy named JT Barnett, who's just this young 20-something swagger-filled TikTok guy, but he's talking about TikTok as a business. He's talking to organizations. He helps organizations find someone to be like the face and voice of their TikTok channel. And he has just very interesting ideas and thinking about this new wave of media. How do we engage people with things like TikTok, where people are spending increasingly more time, of all aged people are spending more time. I don't know, who else am I listening to these days? I don't know. It's hard. It's sometimes hard. It's until I literally go through what are those podcasts I'm doing right now. And recently I've gotten into Donald Miller's content around story. I've always known about it, but I've been binging a few of his podcasts lately. So it changes. I go through phases. I would say I don't, there isn't one that I follow most closely, but I'm trying to be aware, even in when I was in church, working in the local church, one of the things that would inspire me was, because I live in a downtown, it was the shop windows of the flagship stores of big brands. I wanted to see how they decorated their signage, and the look and feel of their branding was always inspiring to me, and what we were doing for Christmas or Easter or something at church. So inspiration is everywhere. That's
cool. Hey, back up, detour a little bit. TikTok. Okay. We can't spend a ton of time on this, and because it could be a black hole, just like spending time on TikTok can be a black hole.
Yes, that's true.
Are you coaching many churches in the space of TikTok? You see any churches utilizing TikTok in a way that is moving the needle for them?
Yeah. That's a good question. In general, the trick about video is the perception is it can cost a lot more than just doing photography. And so it takes a lot longer for churches to turn the ship to do the new thing. So people are just feeling great, like they're getting the handle on how to do nice photos on Instagram. And now everyone's saying that doesn't really matter anymore. Try video. So I think at some level, just as to be honest, I'm trying most recently on my own Instagram to play around with reels, and so they're on TikTok as well, but trying to figure out consistently regular, quick little clips. And what I'm trying to do is like, and I keep asking my team, how can we do this as sustainably as possible? It's only going to work if it's easy, light, fun to do. And so I'm literally just picking up my phone, talking into the phone, trying to keep it as basic as possible. There's lots of, I would as a really, just a direction for churches, I would lean away if I was a church from following trends of doing TikTok dances and the common, like whatever the sound clip of the week is that everyone's doing. It's hard to keep up with that stuff. It is hard to be sustainable.
Yeah.
If you have capacity, have fun and try it. I'm not saying don't have fun, but I think it's really hard to feel the pressure to keep up with that, where I think there are other things that churches do really well. So like cutting a clip from your sermon that you're producing every week anyways, or, having the pastor jump on a Sunday afternoon or the Monday morning and give an extra thought out of what they couldn't. Just film yourself saying the thing you didn't have time to say on Sunday, and doing things that feel like the path of least resistance is how I would say churches should approach TikTok, because I think there's a lot of pressure to do all these other things that you can do with TikTok. But a lot of people, they think I don't have the capacity for that. So then they don't do anything at all. And I would say if that's where the attention is, that means that's where the people are. That's the marketplace of the day to reach, especially under 30-year-olds. So if you're trying to reach those people, what is a light and easy, the yoke easy and the burden light way to do it?
Yeah, don't feel like you have to be an expert at it right out of the chute.
No.
Nobody is, and so just start, like your point, just start.
Yeah.
And
but churches, so often we have this perfectionist mentality, and we feel like we have to do things at this high quality level. And if we can't do them at the highest quality level, then we're not going to do them at all. And, I think that's actually, I think it was Rich Birch that recently was talking about that on our show, was that, once upon a time, he said he prescribed to this idea that, the quality of the weekend service and the engagement was the most important thing. And he's pivoted and realized that consistency is far more important than the quality. Do the best that you can, do it consistently. And in anything that I coach churches on, in terms of a new initiative, we talk to church leaders all the time about, repurposing sermon content and doing new things. I say, I can give you 10 different things today that you probably should be doing with your sermon content. But if you'll just pick one that you think is sustainable, that you can do consistently over a long period of time, just start there. Don't try to do all 10, at least do one. And so I think even looking at TikTok, I'm a incredible novice and I'm ignorant when it comes to TikTok. I mean, other than when my son shoves a video in front of my face and says, "Hey, here, watch this. This is a great TikTok." Like I'll scroll through reels every once in a while, but I don't really spend any time on it. But I'm just kind of curious, because one of these days I'm going to have that conversation with the church and they're going to say, "Hey, help me with TikTok." And I'm like, "Call Joanna. I'm not really sure." So you better get it figured out, Joanna.
I'm working on it. And that's it. Like maybe it's the same theme as back to the earlier part of the conversation where we had my philosophy of tell the truth. What I was my heart behind that is not to say you don't have to make your church deliberately look bad, but just like tell the truth is and be honest about how it really is. In the same way with TikTok, we're not saying like do a bad job, but just use what you can sustainably. And I think sustainability is a big question. who's going to be doing it, really practically, who on your team is going to be the one to do it. How often can they do it? Can they batch that content to film a bunch of things all at once? What's the process of uploads, or how, the whole thinking through that whole thing. And then what's the most sustainable, easy way to do it? And from there, you can get fancier. You can, as you get to know the platform. But I think the important thing is just get started, not to be bad at it, but you can't. I just posted a reel today so whenever people are listening to this, they can go find it on my page. It's basically, it's from The Artist's Way. It's a book called The Artist's Way, where it says you can't be learning something and looking good at the same time. You have to choose. Do you want to look good, or do you want to learn? Do you want to grow? And the only way to grow and learn a new platform is you're not going to love the first 20 TikToks that you post as much as the next 20.
Yeah.
It's just part of it.
Well, I think I always say that when it comes to stuff, half the battle is creating the content. The other half is posting it and doing that kind of a thing. Well, if you think about what your pastor just did, he probably spent 15 or 20 hours creating a message, right? Start there. I really like your idea.
Probably you do something else with it besides the Sunday.
Exactly. Yeah. Or you put on your website, and then you think that's good. And I really like your idea on maybe a Monday morning, like how we always land with 4 takeaways, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you have that 5th takeaway, but that's going to be shared on Monday, because you're sharing that, and you're bringing more people back into some engagement and something that can be used to share with others. So yeah. I like that idea.
And he can record it, he or she, they can record it on Sunday.
That's
when
right.
They're thinking about it. Like, there was this thing, we just didn't have time, but there's this little nugget that I learned about the original Hebrew word, but we didn't get a chance to talk about it.
Yeah.
He can record that right away when he's excited. And I would say if he records it on the Sunday, maybe the other pieces, he probably has his hair and his shirt looking okay. Like he's not scrubby and whatever, if he's been in front of people. So it's probably a good day for him to film something. Yeah. And he could just talk to his phone for a minute. Then whether he or someone else can post it.
And if they build their sermon, like with that intentionality that on Sunday afternoon, I also record this, then you got a weekly rhythm. Yeah. It's not like, oh gosh, we forgot to ask him. No, he builds it into his thing, right? So that would be,
the drive home, right? He hops in his car at the end of the Sunday, he sits in and just give 1 minute.
What's the Spirit saying
about, just how about the day and something that he didn't have time to get into, or something he wants to reemphasize, or
whatever it might be.
As a pastor who's preached hundreds of sermons in my life, I will tell you the hardest thing in the world is looking at the content that you have and deciding what needs to be cut from Sunday so that you don't preach into people's lunch reservations. And and what you're sharing here is actually the antidote.
Western church problem.
Yeah, it's the antidote to that is, if I know I need to cut, I was half joking. Part of it though is attention span, right? I mean, you've got a window, and you need to respect your children's ministry workers. And when the curriculum is done and they're left freewheeling, they don't appreciate that. If, couple of minutes, okay. 20 minutes, probably not so much. But as you look at the content that you have, not everything can fit into every sermon when you're doing your study and you're doing your exegesis of text and you get all your illustrations. And I actually used to do that. It was pre-TikTok, pre-Instagram Reels, but I would post a video on my church's Facebook channel before the Sunday. I would always come up with an illustration or an idea that I knew fit really well with the message, but I wasn't going to be able to fit it into the sermon on Sunday. So I would actually record myself giving that illustration or that story or that little thing as a teaser for the sermon that was going to come on Sunday. And I would post that online on a Thursday. But really you can do it the same way, right? Is you can use that as TikTok or Reels content or social content, take those things off the cutting room floor and find another way to repurpose those so that that hard work that you have is not in vain. I wrote a great story or I came up with a great idea, but it's just not going to fit this Sunday.
Well, and of course, some of the gift of preparing a sermon, I as someone who does that as well, I think some of it is just for the preacher. Some of it is in this sort of gift that God gives them of doing an intensive study. And some of it isn't to share. Some of it is just for them, and it's a gift to them from God. As they learn and study, they found something that's a nugget for their week that maybe they don't have time to offer to anyone else. But anytime we can add those bonus, it's like that same, like when on the old DVDs we all used to have where you got the bonus content. We loved it. Bring on the bonus content.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Why do people sit through those Marvel movies for 3.5 hours and then they sit through the credits to see what happens after the credits, right? There's always something, that extra thing there. Hey, this has been a really interesting, very diverse conversation. We've talked about a lot of different things. It's been fun. And I've appreciated your time today with us, Joanna. As we wrap up, do you have any parting shots, any things that you want to leave with our audience, anything that we didn't ask you that you thought would have been worth asking you to have the conversation?
And how do people get a hold of you?
I mean, just as a means of encouragement, the last few years have been really hard. Everyone's doing the best they can with what they have. But then also, I think, whether it's, these fine gentlemen here hosting the podcast or people like me or, others, they're, if you're tired, if you're burnt out, the fastest way to that thing that you feel discouraged about might very well be hiring these guys. And I don't mean that as anything other than just, I think sometimes we can sit so long in discouragement about things we're not good at when there's people right in front of us who would love to help us, point us in the right direction. So it's just in general, if you need an accountant, hire an accountant.
That's right.
If you need help with this kind of thing, there are people who can help you. And we, through things like these podcasts and, things on my own channels of tutorial stuff, there's lots of free, great expertise that you can get. And so I hear and feel the discouragement and exhaustion of so many. And also there's like a ton of people out there who just want to help you and want to give you free resources and they don't even want your money. They just want to help. Yes. So I hope that's an encouragement to people. Word made digital, like John chapter 1. That's where the podcast I host and the team, the company that I lead, Word Made Digital is a play off of John chapter 1. When the word, as Eugene Peterson said in the message, the word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. So what do we do when the word becomes digital? That is when the word goes into the palm of our hands, into our phones. How do we think in this new way? And I say that as a question because we're all figuring it out together. So people listening, they know things we don't know. We know things they don't know. Let's help each other. There's lots of resources as we all try and learn this whole new world.
Thanks, Joanna. We really appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you.